In this episode of Streets of Liverpool, we are starting in Toxteth and the Holy Land. These 19th century terraces are known as the Holy Land because the streets bear the names of biblical figures like Moses, Jacob and Isaac. And beyond the Holy Land, on Mill Street, we arrive at a real architectural gem, the Florence Institute. Dating from 1899, the Florrie was built by City Alderman Sir Bernard Hall, who commissioned architect H.W. Keefe to design the building. He wanted to create a place of recreation for the poor and working boys of the area, and he named it after his daughter Florence, who died at the age of 22. The building itself is a fine example of late Victorian architecture with bold use of terracotta facing bricks and finials. It originally boasted splendid interiors, with a great hall where concerts and boxing matches were staged, along with an airy gym on the top floor and a well-stocked library. The appeal of the Florrie spread far and wide, and it attracted young people from all over the south of the city to play football, baseball, basketball, and to take part in boxing and gymnastics. Generations of boxing greats trained at the Florrie, including British and Commonwealth bantamweight Alan Rudkin. A young Jerry Marsden learned to play guitar here and staged performances with a skiffle band in the Grand Hall, before he went on to form Jerry and the Pacemakers and find fame in the Mersey Beat era. But before locals could mark her centenary, local authority funding for the Florrie had been withdrawn, and it fell into a state of disrepair and was closed. Vandalism led to a big fire in 1999 that left the building a gutted shell, and its future looked bleak. Initial attempts to raise funds to refurbish and reopen the building faltered, but eventually a trust was formed, and won the backing of the Prince of Wales, who proclaimed how much he admired the building. Despite decades of setbacks, enough funding was raised to restore the building to its former glory in a scheme that was completed in 2012. Believed to be the oldest surviving purpose-built boys' club in the UK, the Florrie earned a royal seal of approval in 2013, when Prince Charles paid a visit to perform the official reopening ceremony. It may be hard to believe, but for more than 300 years this was a walled forest. Toxteth Deer Park was designated as a royal park, and the local gentry had hunting rights protected by the king. It was not until the end of the 16th century that its status as a royal park ceased and settlers started to move in. By the 19th century, it had transformed into a residential area with a mixture of grand houses and more humble terraced homes. In the early 19th century, this area was the township of Toxteth, which had its own administration. Officially named the Township of Toxteth Park Public Offices, this sandstone building with its impressive pillars was built in 1895. But it had long been known simply as Toxteth Town Hall, and after the township merged into the city of Liverpool, Toxteth Town Hall became a district council office and remained in use for more than 100 years. It played a major role in the civic life of the area, and during its long history served many purposes. These include that of a registry office for births and deaths, a medical dispensary, the local mortuary, the coroner's court, offices for poor law relief means testing, a food dispensary, and during wartime as police cells. More recently it has been restored and refurbished for use by community groups and is hideout for social events. We are now heading down Park Road into the Dingle. The name is taken from that of a fast-running stream named the Dingle. It flowed down here along what is now Park Road to the site of the ancient chapel of Toxteth, and then into the estuary at a place then called Knot's Hole. Knowing that a river once cascaded past the site, we can better understand why it was chosen as the site for the Toxteth Unitarian Chapel and School. The chapel was built in 1618 by a group of Puritans who had left Bolton to escape persecution and settled into what was then a remote spot on the banks of the River Mersey. The chapel is built of local sandstone and has a slate roof. The neighbouring schoolroom actually predates the chapel, having been built in 1611. The interior has the pulpit at the east end, galleries on 3 sides and box pews throughout. The north and south galleries date from the 17th century, and the connecting gallery is from the 18th century. Two of the box pews are dated 1650 and 1700. It was in the 1830s that the building became known as the Ancient Chapel of Toxteth, and for a period it was little used. But by the turn of the 20th century, the congregation had swelled as new homes were built in the area. The organ was an addition in this period, installed in 1906 by Brinley and Foster. Heading down Ullet Road now, we are entering a part of Toxteth Park that became for wealthy ship owners and merchants who built homes here in the 19th century. Houses were never built directly in Princess Park itself, as originally intended, but the concept of homes set in a magnificent landscape was brought to fruition here in Sefton Park. After royal control of the Deer Park ended in 1591, it came under the control of the Earls of Sefton. In the 19th century, the green fields and woodland of Toxteth started to be swallowed up by narrow streets and crowded tenements. But at the same time, merchants wanted sites for large mansions in South Liverpool and were inspired by Birkenhead Park, which was laid out in 1841. An 1864 Act of Parliament allowed corporations to borrow sums up to £500,000 for large schemes. In Liverpool, 375 acres of land was purchased in 1867 at a cost of £250,000 from the Earl of Sefton. The Corporation of Liverpool launched a Europe-wide competition to find a design for the park, and 29 entries were received. A design by French landscape architect Edouard André was the winner, and much of the detailed work was undertaken by Liverpool architect Louis Hornblower. The park was opened on the 20th of May 1872 by Prince Arthur, who dedicated it as being for the health and enjoyment of the townspeople. It is based on a design of circular and oval paths and roads, with 2 natural watercourses flowing into a 7-acre man-made lake. Hornblower's designs for the park lodges and entrances were elaborate structures that included follies, shelters, caves, and aviary and boathouses. A deer park was included, and the strong water theme was reflected by the presence of pools, waterfalls, and stepping stones. Most of the Victorian mansions around the perimeter were built between 1885 and 1895, with some Edwardian houses added later. The Palm House was another victim of neglect in the 70s and 80s, and was saved only thanks to the sterling efforts of volunteers who formed a trust that raised the funds to see it restored. It is now a popular venue for weddings and other functions. Join us after the break when the Streets of Liverpool takes a look at the legacy of the temperance movement in the city. Taking a short diversion out of the park, we need to cast our minds back to the 19th century, when the evil of drink was demonised. Total abstinence became a way of life for teetotalers, and temperance halls sprung up all over England. This is Egbert People's Hall, the successor to one of those early temperance halls. In 1876, the Egbert Cocoa Rooms had been opened near the site as the temperance movement's answer to the public house. In the cocoa rooms, non-alcoholic drinks were sold cheaply and facilities were to be provided for reading and indoor games. Sounds a bit like the modern coffee shops of today, doesn't it? By 1898, the need for bigger premises was identified, and wealthy local businessman John Temple paid for this building in Egbert Vale, complete with a gymnasium and bowling green. The Egbert People's Hall, which he financed, compromises of 500 square yards on 3 floors and stands on an acre of land. The building has been undergoing refurbishment, and the aim is for it to have access onto Sefton Park itself. The atmosphere of the original building has been carefully preserved, but these days it includes a fully licensed bar. It is also available to hire for weddings and private functions. Before we leave the park, a mention of the most contentious issue in its recent history: the campaign by local residents opposing City Council plans to sell to house builders this green space known as Sefton Park Meadows. A decision on its future was expected as we shot this footage. These leafy lanes with their sandstone walls look quite ancient, but in fact most of the houses, schools and churches in Mossley Hill are relatively new additions to the landscape. The most impressive of these is Mossley Hill Parish Church, which stands on top of the hill and can be picked out as a landmark from as far away as the mountains of North Wales. Built between 1870 and 1880 and designed by Lancaster architects Paley and Austin, the church and vicarage cost £28,000, equivalent to 2.3 million at today's rates. Faced in red sandstone with ashlar dressings, it has a tile roof. It was financed with a bequest by merchant Matthew James Glenton and is designed in a late 13th century style. It is dedicated to St Matthew and St James. Planned in the shape of a crucifix, it has a tower at the crossing, a chancel with a north organ loft, a south chapel and an octagonal vestry. The tower has angled buttresses, a stair turret and clock faces on 3 sides. The majestic interior features a centre space under the Great Tower. Much of the stained glass was destroyed in the World War II. It was replaced by clear glass on the sides of the church and by stained glass in the east and west windows. The glass in the east window depicts the Apostles' Creed and in the west window Paradise Lost. The reredos has a canopy and a coloured carving of the upper room in Emmaus, which is a copy of a glass mosaic in Westminster Abbey. From Rose Lane, it is a short hop around the corner to Studley House. Set in magnificent grounds, it is now a museum and art gallery open to the public 7 days a week. Known originally as Plain Studley, it was completed in 1824 for corn merchant and former Lord Mayor Nicholas Robinson. The identity of the original architect is disputed. Some authorities suggest that the original design was probably by John Whiteside Casson. However, National Museums Liverpool say that the name of the architect is unknown, although there are features that suggest it may have been the work of Thomas Harrison, a Yorkshire-born architect who drew his inspiration from ancient Rome. Shipping magnate George Holt bought the house in 1883 and began a programme to modify and extend his new home. It contains the collection of paintings and sculptures amassed by Holt, displayed in the original setting. Among the works on show are paintings by Gainsborough, Reynolds, Landseer, Millay and Turner. The house was bequeathed to the City of Liverpool by Holt's daughter, Emma Georgina Holt, in 1944 and is now managed by National Museums Liverpool. Studley underwent £1 million refurbishment and reopened after 2 years in May 2007. The restoration included redecorating in the style of George Holt's era and modifying the first floor, where 3 new attractions were incorporated. This is Brodie Avenue, named after the forward-thinking city engineer John Alexander Brodie. He was the man who laid out the plans for the Liverpool's Ring Road Queen's Drive, the first dual carriageway in the UK. He also invented football goal nets. Used to this day around the world, they are the innovation of which Brodie said he was most proud, even although he designed the original Mersey Tunnel. Now we are deep in the heart of suburbia and heading for a school that was the seat of education of one of the city's most famous sons. Now known as Calderstone School, it was more famous as Quarry Bank High School when John Lennon was among its pupils and set up his first band, the Quarrymen. Quarry Bank High School was founded in 1921 and saw its first intake of 225 boys on the 11th of January 1922. The first headmaster was Old Etonian Mr. R.F. Bailey, who modelled the school on the regime of public schools. From the outset, the school set high standards and earned a reputation for academic excellence. John Lennon went to Quarry Bank High School from September 1952, and it was here that John and his friends formed a rock band, calling themselves the Quarrymen. The name of the Quarrymen was taken not just from the school, but from the first line of the school song, which begins, "Quarrymen, old before our birth." In 1967, Quarry Bank High Boys' School merged with neighbouring Calder High School for girls and Morrison School. It adopted the name Quarry Bank Comprehensive School. In 1985, the school also merged with Egbert Vale High School, which operated on 4 separate sites since 1800. It was then that it adopted its current name, Calderstone School. A series of property disposals and a new building now sees the school housed on the original Calder House and Quarry Bank sites. Less than a minute's walk away is Calderstones Park. We've all heard of Strawberry Fields, but Calderstones too was John Lennon's playground in his formative teenage years. Extending to 126 acres, Calderstones Park is popular with families. It also includes a number of different attractions, including a playground and a botanical garden. There is also a lake with geese and ducks overlooked by the Mansion House, which features a cafe and a children's play area. One of the park's most ancient features is the Allerton Oak. It is estimated to be more than 1,000 years old, and according to legend, the ancient local 100 court sat beneath its branches. Calderstone's house, its Georgian mansion, built in 1828 by lead shop manufacturer Joseph Need Walker. It was built in 1875 by co-founder of the Cunard Line, Charles McIver, whose family sold the house and grounds to the Corporation of Liverpool in 1902. The Reader organisation charity has now made the Mansion House its home and has secured investment to carry out a programme of restoration and improvement. But perhaps the park's greatest claim to fame are the Calderstones themselves. They are 6 sandstone boulders, which are the remains of a dolmen, a single-chamber Stone Age burial tomb, dating from around 10,000 years BC. The Calderstones were unearthed in 1825 when it was reported that clay urns were also found, containing ashes and human bones. During the 19th century, some academics suggested the Calderstones were part of a Druid's henge circle, but it was later realised that the stones were a ruined burial monument. Close examination of markings on the stones show worn carvings, including spirals, concentric circles, arcs and footprints. Several of these carvings are similar to examples found in Anglesey and at a Neolithic burial site in Northern Ireland. The stones had been placed near the entrance to the estate, but were moved to the Harthill greenhouses in the 1950s to protect them from further weathering. John Lennon's route home would have taken him past or through Calderstones Park each day that he attended Quarry Bank School. He would have often been seen along here, tree-lined Menlove Avenue, with a satchel of school books on his back. This was his destination. Built in the 1930s at number 251 Menlove Avenue is a 3-bedroom semi-detached house named Mendips. This became the Lennon's home when his mother Julia sent him to live with his Aunt Mimi at the age of 5 in July 1946. It is now a Grade 2 listed building owned by the National Trust, after Lennon's widow Yoko Ono bought the house and donated it to the Trust in 2002. Each year it attracts thousands of visitors around the world, although the number who can enter the property at any one time is strictly limited. Tune in next time to tour the streets of Liverpool, when we again explore some of the areas outside the city centre.